A Jubilee administration's anti-corruption report card released by the Society for International Development indicates that the Jubilee government has failed to tackle the issue of corruption that has seen widespread demonstrations from civil society groups in the recent past. The report highlights continued existence of laws that impede high-level prosecutions as well as politicization of corruption, is one of the reasons the war on graft has not been won, even as the Attorney General who attended the report launch admitted that his office, as well as that of the Director of Public Prosecution, is not receiving sufficient funds to tackle the vice. Well, our reporter Timothy Otieno attended that particular event as they were unveiling that particular report on anti-corruption. Let's now link up with him from our City Centre studios. Good afternoon, Tim. What exactly stood out in this particular report?
Well, Akisa, this particular report, of course, highlighting what similar reports have highlighted over the past few months in regards to corruption, and that is the issue that the Jubilee administration is actually not doing quite well in that war. Particularly, of course, they were highlighting specific areas that they were raising concern and that needed to be worked on, even as the administration seeks to campaign for a second term in office. And now one of the areas that they had highlighted was the issue that there's a seemingly large amount of backlog of prosecution of cases, corruption-related cases within Kenya's judiciary. And in particular, they were mentioning that there are about 534 corruption cases across all courts within the country. And out of the 534 cases, only 22 have been concluded. And out of the 22, just 18 of them have led to conviction. So a really small number compared to the magnitude of cases of corruption that are before the courts in this country. And of course, they were highlighting that that really does not show a government committed to ensuring that those found guilty or those accused of corruption cases are brought to book. But of course, indeed, we have seen some sort of efforts being pumped into this. We recently saw about 28, in general, there are 28 officials who have since been brought to court and have cases to answer within the courts in regards to the NYS scandal at the Ministry of Devolution and Planning. But whether these cases really come to fruition is really the main arc, and of course what they were highlighting as being a major concern. We've seen Chicken Gate, where in the United Kingdom people were actually prosecuted, are actually behind bars. Not the same for this country. But aside from the backlog, they were also highlighting the issue that there is some seemingly politicization of political proponents and those who have been accused of corruption cases. And aside from that, they were also saying that indeed much more needs to be done in regards to the IFMIS, the Integrated Financial Management and Information System that the government had introduced to expand on transparency of transaction and procurement within government ministries. Now, aside from highlighting the changes needed in that particular system, there are recommendations that they had made in regards to this particular report. If you could listen to the recommendations that they had suggested to help fight corruption.
We want the Jubilee administration to grant prosecutorial powers to the EACC. We want the Jubilee administration to finalize and enact the draft bill, bribery bill, the whistleblowers protection bill, and the parastatal bill. We want the Jubilee administration to immediately gazette and operationalize the commencement of the Public Benefits Act 2013. We want the Jubilee administration to finalize the digitalization of key public service records, and we want the Jubilee administration to fast-track all pending investigations and cases, specifically the National Youth Service case and the IEBC election kit procurement case, famously known as the Chicken Gate. So we are very specific on the cases that we want to see them concluded by the end of this regime.
Mimi naomba mtupatie miezi mitatu tu, na kufikia March mwaka ujao mtaanza kusikia yale mtakayosikia, na jela mtaona tayari tumeongeza nafasi ya wale wataoingia.
Of course, that is the Attorney General, of course, saying that within the next 3 months, Kenyans may see radical changes in regards to the fight against graft. Could we see a high-profile case come to conclusion? Could we see a high-profile personality be brought to book in regards to the corruption cases that have plagued this nation over time? Well, 3 months is the time period that the Attorney General does promise that much work will be put on the ground and they'll move from just talk to action. Aside from that, he had highlighted that one of the challenges that was facing his office, as well as the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution and the Office of the Auditor General, was that they were not receiving sufficient funds to tackle corruption. Now, those three offices have been tasked with highlighting as well as prosecuting those found guilty of, or rather those suspected of conducting corrupt dealings. And they were saying without enough funding, they can barely conduct their activities in the right manner, and that there's that lack of capacity to actually bring those suspected of committing crimes relating to corruption to book. So that's some of the issues that were highlighted this morning. Of course, the Attorney General did say that tomorrow his office, as well as the Office of the Judiciary, headed by the Chief Justice David Maraga, will be making a major announcement in regards to radical changes and radical measures that will be put in place to ensure that corruption is fought to the very end in this country, Akisa.
Tim, thank you very much for that. That's our reporter, Timothy Otieno, joining us from our City Centre studios. Let's now get into sports. Western Stima midfielder Kenneth Muguna was named the 2016 Kenyan Premier League Most Valuable Player at a gala event held in Nairobi on Tuesday night. The youngster, who had a stellar debut season in 2016, also won the Midfielder of the Year accolade at the same event.